Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good. This is going to be a very interesting session. We switched the order, so we are starting before with the last one. I have to apologize for the delay. We are starting a bit later than predicted, so we are going to try to make sure that we adjust to the timing. The session of today is climate change and resilience. I think that it's a very huge topic, and we will try to make sure that we narrow it down as much as possible. And I hope that you enjoy that. For this session, we have four panelists with diverse experiences, and we are really looking forward to see what their experiences are. I will invite one by one. Each panelist will introduce themselves and start the presentation. I think that it's important to make sure that we understand that what we are discussing here is one of the many challenges that urban systems will confront or are confronting. Probably the most important one, climate change. Not the only one, but the most important challenge that we are facing nowadays. And I think that it's important for us to take these approaches in building urban resilience from the different aspects. Let me invite, after we have the four presentations, we will open the floor for some questions. So be ready to ask some smart questions. and then we are going to wrap up with the discussion. Let me invite first Ares Gabas from the Barcelona City Council. She's a great partner, and please, Ares, if you can take a seat, yeah. I will invite all of the panelists, and then we are going to start one by one. The second is Itai, another panelist that it's coming with a very interesting approach. He's coming from Palo Alto, and we are going to see how they approach climate change and urban resilience. I have a third one, which is Mark. Welcome, Mark. Really looking forward to hear your presentation as well. Our fourth panelist did not arrive yet. I hope that she's targeting to arrive soon. So I will introduce her once she arrives. But you can see all the pictures there. Ares, the floor is yours, please. You can take it from there, I think. Or you prefer here? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. Thank you very much, Esteban. I am Ares Gabas. I'm the head of the Resilience Department in Barcelona. And I'm going to talk about actually we have our resilience approach is a holistic approach. We're interested in making a city more resilient to different sorts of hazards. But today I'm going to focus on climate action, which is actually, it is one of the priorities, of the top priorities of the City Council right now. We're working on our climate emergency declaration. We're also conducting a participatory process to write down, to have a consensus on this declaration and make a commitment for an urgent measures program for the next 3 years. But we also have the climate plan, which is long-term. We have a vision 2030, and it's a comprehensive and holistic plan. So it's a plan of plans, as we like to call it, because it interacts with many different sectors, with mobility, with the green and infrastructure plan, also with links with circular economy. Also, second important aspect is that it's science-based. So we based all the measures and actions that are included in the plan on scientific evidence. So we have downscaled the climate projections with the Meteorological Service of Catalonia. And from there, we conducted a vulnerability assessment in order to know what we were most vulnerable at and where we needed to act. Also, it's an ambitious plan. It is aligned with the Paris Agreement goals, and it aims at carbon neutrality by 2050. It puts people at the very core of all the policies and and measures, at the center of all the measures. It's innovative. We need to think differently. We need to think more creative in the way we implement the action. And also it's co-produced. We conducted a participatory process as well in order to co-create the climate plan with the citizenship. So as I said, it's aligned with the Paris Agreement goals, but we try to go beyond. I mean, we're not. We need to go beyond. We need to push the agenda forward in order to not to reach this 1.5 increase in temperature, which is also an ambitious goal because it means reducing the emissions in a very large rate by 2050. So as I was saying, we are based on the scientific evidence that we have. We're going to have the future in Barcelona, climate future in Barcelona. We will have increase in temperatures and a decrease in the overall precipitation, but most importantly, a different rain pattern that we are in a Mediterranean region, and we already have drought periods combined with intense rain episodes, and this is going to be increased. So these are some figures that we have. Until 2007, which is when we did the plan, we had one heat wave every 4 years. It is foreseen in the future to increase by 8. I mean, have 2 by year by the end of the century in the 4.5 scenario, but it could come to 4 to 5 heat waves per year with the 8.5 scenario. And by last year, we already had 3 heat waves, so more than the usual. So we need to address these issues now. I mean, in the future, they're going to be more severe, and it's going to make us more vulnerable if we don't act now. But we already need to do so because we are already suffering them. Same thing with the rain. We've had, the last year we had the 6 episodes over the last 30 years that we have the records. 6 of the most heavy episodes and concentrated rainfalls happened during last year, so it's something that is already hitting, and we need to continue advancing on that. Also, we have an issue with water supply, also because this is irregularity in the rainfall pattern, and we foresee that we will need 18 cubic hectometers extra by mid-century. So we also need to increase the measures and the work that we are doing on that, and having using different resources and regenerated water, so enhancing alternative resources for this water supply. Also, we are a coastal city, so sea floods are also an issue for us. And, well, I already mentioned about the flooding. At the same time, we're not only interested in the infrastructure of the built environment. As I said in the beginning, we are putting vulnerable people at the center of the climate policies. We see that there's a socioeconomic inequality, and we need to balance that. So there's evidence that the economic situation and health are related, so we need to solve also that. And at the same time, climate change is more vulnerable population in economic terms is also more vulnerable to climate change, and we have a rate of energy poverty so we need to make sure that no one is deprived from the access to basic services. As I said, we base all the measures and the policies of the climate plan on science. We conducted this vulnerability assessment with all the information that we have, and we generated these heat risk maps, these risk maps to heat, to flooding, to different sectors that we studied. And on the mitigation side, we see that the trend is decreasing from both energy consumption and greenhouse gas emissions. But we need to go further, and this is the tendency that we have. I mean, with the current trend, we would reach the 45%, which is the goal for the climate plan by 2050. And if we want to reach carbon neutrality, we need to start pushing the action now. So At the same time, we need to work on enhancing the renewable energies in the city. Only a small amount still of the city energy supply comes from renewable sources. So there's a lot of work and a lot of actions in the climate plan that aim at that. And we need to intervene in all the many different sectors. This is the distribution of the emissions. So this means we need to work on transportation measures, on a more sustainable mobility for the city, but we also in the industry, in the domestic sector, and buildings, and so on. As I said, it is a co-produced plan, and we came together with these 2,042 measures with these very ambitious goals of reducing by 45% the emissions, the greenhouse emissions by 2030, and reaching carbon neutrality in 2050. Also increasing green areas by 1.5 square kilometers, which in Barcelona is quite a huge challenge because we are a very dense and compact city. Also reaching we are, in terms of water consumptions, we are at a very quite good level because we have 108 liters consumption per inhabitant per day, but we aim to reach at the 100, which is the standard set by the World Health Organization. And also on climate justice, to reach zero energy poverty, so making sure no vulnerable population is deprived from basic services, also 100% clean funding, and also co-producing and the actions with the citizenships. And we are boosting a line of public direct subsidies. So all these measures are, and I think I'm over time now, so we have measures such as improving and adapting the services for the elderly population, which are also more vulnerable to heat, for instance. Making sure that no person is, for economic reasons, doesn't have access to basic services. Refurbishing the building park of the city with energy renovations to reach better standards without less energy consumption. Also working lines on preventing heat, such as creating a network of climate shelters, as well as, well, increasing the green, not only in parks or public space, where we have opportunities, but not so many. We also need to increase green in facades and in the roof terraces, because we need to take any opportunity we have to increase the green surface of the city. Also improving or transitioning to a more sustainable mobility system, enhancing more sustainable, reducing the use of private vehicle by enhancing the use of bike and more sustainable mobility systems. And with it, I think I'm going to finish. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ares. I think it's an impressive presentation. We could hear you for much longer. The important part of the presentation, I think, is to realize that that everything is interconnected. So if you see, this is not, it doesn't affect only one of the many systems of an urban system. So it's important to think in that from that point of view. Whatever you do in one area will have an impact in another area, which is the main issue that we have considered when we're working in cities and in front of any challenge. I think we already got our last speaker, our fourth speaker, not last one. Please, come in. We are going to, yes, please, if you come and sit there. We are going to keep going with the order. Itai goes next. He will introduce himself and then make his presentation. And then after that, Mark. I think we are running, against time. So instead of me standing up, coming here every time, let's go, one after the other. So Itai first, then Mark, and then we end up with Ming, and then we open the floor. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Esteban. Hello, everybody. My name is Itai Dadon, and I'm head of the Smart Cities activity for Itron. Itron is a technology vendor that serves utilities and cities around the world. We operate in over 100 countries and really help the cities and the utilities that we serve better manage their resources like energy and water and improve services that they provide to communities around transportation, infrastructure, safety and security, and digital services. We've been around for over 4 decades, and that really gives us a little bit of the view over time of how things have changed. And just to make sure, is there anyone in the room that believes that climate change is not happening? Okay, just to make sure. Guys, not only it's happening, this is happening much faster than we think, and it's compounded by the massive urbanization process that is happening around the world, meaning that cities not only need to face the heat waves, the floods, the tornadoes, hurricanes, but also on top of that, there's more and more population that is suffering because of these events. And these events are happening more frequently and in higher and higher amplitudes. There are 2 ways of becoming more resilient in fighting climate change. One is the proactive dimension, and one is the reactive dimension. And I will give some examples of how we do and work with cities around the world around these 2 areas. The first dimension is the reactive, which is typically what happens first. Cities, for example, like Houston in the US and Texas, that suffer from recurring floods and flooding, same for the city of Jakarta, need to face measures of how to try to prevent those floods, reduce the impact of those those flooding events, and try to get alerts so that we can help the community resist better when this happens. We do that by deploying technology. We do that by educating the community. So it's a multidimensional activity that is happening, and that has to have a benefit across 3 dimensions. The first one is the economic dimension, the second is the social, and the third is the environmental. But first of all, it has to stand on its feet and have a viable business model and a business case in order to be deployed, because cities also need to be able to deploy that technology as it always carries a certain cost. Another type of reactive measures is, for example, with the heat waves in the city of Paris, for example. We have found a very creative way around our smart streetlights deployments on the poles in the city of Paris. We've developed with the city of Paris a certain type of basic vegetation that grows on the pole and provides not only shade in the sidewalks, in the streets, but helps reduce the overall temperature and the heat maps on those streets. At the same time, with also providing the mist water on the sidewalks in order to help the population, especially the elder citizens, especially where we have benches in parks and things like that. Again, all these measures don't change the way climate change is happening, but they help the community face the effects of what this is doing to them. Another way to think about it is trying to reduce, again, and create more hyper-local data in the city is critical in order to be able to be data-driven in our decision of where to deploy those measures and what exactly do we need in terms of a solution in every space. That can only be done when you have enough data to actually go about and do that. So we help cities like the city of New York deploy air quality sensors and noise sensors and things that, and traffic monitoring systems to understand what is actually happening block by block in order to then take a decision on where it is most urgent and most important to actually deploy measures to make the city more resilient. In Florida, we have across the state, our customer, Florida Power and Light, has over 1 million poles. And every time that there is a hurricane going and it knocks down tens of thousands of these poles. In order to become resilient, it means to bring back energy and services as fast as possible. How do we know which poles went down in order to go directly to those poles, bring them up, and bring back electricity as fast for the community? This is done with special sensors that we also deploy for them. Now, how about the proactive or the things that would actually help us actually fight climate change in order to, over time, reduce those effects and those events? So again, we're trying to look at what are the sources of the carbon footprint of the city, right? The mayors of many, many cities around the world, even in the United States, come up with very aggressive targets, -80, minus by 2030, completely neutral by 2040. But once the mayor sets that objective, what do we do next? Right? There's many, so let's identify what are the sources of carbon emissions. Let's put in place the right sensors to create that hyperlocal data to allow us to actually measure what is going on, what is the transportation situation in the city, what is the situation, how much buildings are actually consuming, how much water we're actually losing in our infrastructure because of leaks and things like that. And deploying all those systems over time is extremely important to then start to decreasing the carbon emission, understanding when the grid is cleaner or dirtier, right, when we're actually using renewable energy versus not renewable energy. And if, for example, at a certain point we're not using renewable energy but fossil fuels, let's now try to be aggressive, more aggressive in reducing consumptions. For example, stopping vehicle chargers, reducing the thermostats in buildings and houses in order to reduce the overall energy use, to even more aggressively go about reducing the carbon footprint of a city. So all these things are things we're doing with the cities directly, with the utilities that operate in those cities and serve the communities. It's very important to go to every home, every person. It has to be combined with a lot of education, as the private sector alone cannot do that. The cities alone cannot do that. It has to be a collective effort by the community and everybody together. Thank you very much.
Do you want to pass?
Yep. Okay. Hi. So my name is Mark Saunders. I work for Ferrovial Services. I lead an innovation function within the organization focused on the city services that we deliver. So the presentation I want to talk about is about how citizen behavior, we're all citizens of course, so the behavior of all of us can contribute to trying to solve the problems of climate change and city resilience. So in terms of a rundown, I'll do a very brief introduction about who is Ferrovial Services. I'll make the link between us citizens and climate change and resilience. And then I'll make the link also between communication and engagement and then subsequent behavior of the citizens. So how we talk to them, how we engage with them really does affect how they behave and how they respond. And then I'll give a case study to finish. So Ferrovial Services, you can see from the numbers, is a large infrastructure services company. And as I said, the services I'd like to focus on today are the urban services, the ones that we deliver in a city. So these could be recycling, waste collection, highways maintenance, street lighting, all of these kind of services. And these are important and connected to the citizen because we provide all of these services that benefit the citizen directly. Okay, So let's just consider that link between the citizen and climate change. Ultimately, it's all of their behaviors, everything they do, what they wear, what they eat, how they travel, how they heat their homes, all of these points. So all of us have that sort of inherent links straight away to climate change. In terms of resilience, as you can see at the bottom, some of this is how we respond to some of these issues that we have on a daily basis. What options do we have? What choices do we make? You know, for example, I looked at the weather forecast. It's going to rain tomorrow. So not raining now, I don't think, but it's going to rain tomorrow. If the response to that is that we all jump in a car at the same time and try and travel, of course the city has a resilience problem, and the city grinds to a halt. On the right-hand side, you can see this sort of top-down and bottom-up. So climate change and resilience is fraught. We've heard some of it already about targets and policies and strategies, and all of those things. Absolutely need those. And as we said, we as citizens respond with our daily activity, so this behavior bottom-up. What we need to make sure is that these are aligned. If they're not aligned, so if the behaviors of people do not solve the climate change, the worse, they make things worse, then we have an issue. So this alignment is about communication and engagement. But are citizens important? Can they actually change things? Do citizens, through their actions, change things? And here's just a very quick example at a market level and a business model level, how citizens have, through their choices, through use of technology, through the ease of making different decisions, have completely changed different markets, and we're quite familiar with these examples. My argument here, of course, is that if we can make some positive change and some positive behaviors from the citizen, then we can address climate change all the better. But how do we communicate? How do we engage citizens? I'm sure we have some exceptions here, but a lot of the communications relating to climate change tend to be top-down. They tend to be telling people to do things. There are signs telling people what they can't do. And I think that sometimes the stick or the punishment is greater than the reward or the incentive. Okay, so there is no science to this last bit. This is just anecdotal from my point of view. But I think that in any particular change, or when you set new targets for things, could be recycling, could be other mobility, for example, 20% of the people will be compliant. 20% of the people, that probably includes myself, will just say, okay, yep, I'll do that. There seems to be a 20% at the bottom, I don't know if you guys agree, that seem to do exactly the opposite to what you want them to do, which leaves the bulk in the middle. So these are the people, when maybe you change rules, you increase some targets, you say we'll be carbon neutral by 2025, not 2030. These are the people that say maybe, okay? So these are the people that you might be able to engage and persuade to do things differently. So rather than focus with the 20% at the bottom who maybe will never change, my argument is let's try and focus on the 20 plus the 60, so the top 80%. And I think if we do things right, if we engage the people in the correct way, in a meaningful way, we'll get 80% of the result, which is really what we need. Okay, so what is the link between how we engage communication and behavior? If you listen to people, if you study all of their messages, so this is direct conversations, it's social media analysis and other data analysis, you get a vast number of messages, which has actually a smaller number of meanings, and from that you can distill just a very small number of insights. If you get those insights and then you turn those into some meaningful communication and engagement, that's when the bottom of this sort of flow chart here starts to happen. You get the engagement, you start to gently nudge and change the behavior, and you get those positive impacts. I don't think time will allow to describe the example on the right. It's not one of ours, but I think it's a very good one related to the uptake of bike share in Portland in the US. Suffice to say that the two messages, get it free and $12 off, are exactly the same financially for a $12 service, but the Get It Free was 3 times more effective, and for those people who had just moved house, 4 times more effective. So this point about exactly what you communicate and when you communicate, those are important points too. So really, I'd just like to finish with a case study. This is one we call Do Good. And the climate change issue that it's addressing is recycling, so urban recycling. Recycling is obviously positive. In that sense, it reduces the production of greenhouse gases, etc. And certainly relevant to this because it engages people. The top down is there. We know at a European level that there is a target of 50% recycling for urban recycling by the end of next year. That's quite scary. That's quite soon. And it's not there yet. There is a city in northern Spain called Getxo. This is where we are. This is where we are trying this. And Getxo is very, very good at recycling, but unfortunately, it's not quite at the target that's required. So what we've done, we've partnered with the city council, and we're trying to get the city to achieve this target. Just having the targets on its own is not changing the recycling. Just telling people it's 50%, guys, come on, it doesn't make the difference. Okay, so we needed to go and engage them directly. The insights that we did, again, in partnership, and we took a long time, and we spoke to many people. We got the messages, the meanings, remember this flow? So the insights really from the community were, I'm actually connected to my community, so anything you do related to recycling, make it related to my community because that's important to me. Make sure that any effort I make is valued, so you appreciate what I'm doing. We found out that people have a rational and an emotional side to them, so when we communicate and engage, we need to play to both of those. And if I see that it affects me, then I will recycle. So I need to understand the service, how it works, and then I might actually do it. So the response here, you can see some screen grabs from a smartphone app that we've used, and some of the characters and some of the messages. So we've launched this in the city initially at small scale, but it's really starting to get some traction, which is quite exciting. And our response to this, we've put some competition in there. It's very easy to use for people. The more they recycle, the more points they get, and they get prizes as an individual, but also as their community. So I'll leave you with that one if that's okay, but what we can see is if we listen to people first and we communicate and engage in the right way, then we start to get a positive response. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Ming Ho. I'm from China. I just found out actually half an hour ago. I'm probably one of the only NGO representative from China. There are many companies and governments in the exhibition hall, but there are not many NGOs here. But anyway, I'm so honored to be here to give you a big picture introduction of China's city-level climate change mitigation actions. So if you follow climate change or China, I don't know how much you know about it, you probably have seen this tweet from Trump. In 2012, he said the concept of global warming was created and for Chinese in order to make US manufacturing non-competitive. When I started my career on climate change, that was early 20s, I actually heard the different thing. That's what I heard. The concept of global warming was created by the US. So it's very different time now. And now, even in 2009, that was the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference. Many of you probably also know that was one of the turning point of the climate governance, of the world climate governance. Climate change was very political in China. You can see this was a Greenpeace campaign in Beijing, but there were policemen actually standing there in front of them. But now, China is considered one of the leaders. This is in November. There's two presidents saying they are supporting Paris Agreement, while the US are actually quitting it. So what happened and why this has changed in China? No time to describe the details, but I think just give you the recent survey we have done together with media in China. It's very surprisingly high. Over 90% people believe climate change is happening in China. Over 70% are willing to do something to contribute to this movement. But I also want to point out that actually, if you ask the question that, do you mind paying more to buy a more efficient air conditioner? There are only like 50% people said yes. So there are a long way to go to really from policy to actions. So I want to put Chinese cities in context for people who probably didn't know a lot about China. These are the cities in China over 1 million population. There are a lot. So we actually have the policy data of all the cities in our database. China is a country, there are a lot of people living in cities, and there are a lot of people moving into cities. There will be 300 million people, that's whole America, going to move to China, cities over the next 15 years. So that's a big number. So that actually, this is the one of the factors we're facing, that development is actually still urbanization and development, getting better life. That's the basic reality for China's cities. But on climate change, a couple of examples giving you climate change and environment. This is in 2012, July the 21st in Beijing. Beijing is a city like almost 200 kilometers away from the sea. But this flood killed almost 80 people in Beijing. I couldn't believe that by that time. But at that time, not many people actually talk about it in the context of climate change. We blame the city's government not having a better draining system of the city. But this is what happened, and this might have changed people's mindset. But after all, the air pollution is still the most important environment issues to China. This is 2012. That was the year of air pollution in China, 2012, 2013, I would say. Record-breaking pollution. That day, I guess, that was as bad as New Delhi a couple of weeks ago. So China started so-called anti-pollution wall. So when we're talking about resilience, Chinese cities are actually facing three challenges, I would say: air pollution, climate change, and also development, getting better lives. And in China, the city-level climate change mitigation or resilient actions is actually a top-down planning process, but China is trying to adopt world-class policies, even though it's a little bit late. And then having a policy-driven actions. So I'm going to talk a lot about targets and goals, even though I know it's very challenging to achieve it, but at least it's better to have it than none. So in 2010, China already started to have low-carbon pilots. 2011, we started to have eco-city pilot programs. And then there is different pilot programs, and until now, China has 73 cities and regions. They have committed to peak greenhouse gas emission earlier than the national target, and also have developed the low-carbon action plans, which is not as good as the Barcelona one, but again, it's better than none. 29 cities and regions, 5 cities developing 2050 climate change goals already, 400 low-carbon communities, and there are several zero-emission pilots being selected by the government now. So now I want to just give you a little bit of the some specific actions or some sector perspective happening in China fighting climate change or air pollution. I think you probably know China is one of the leader of EV, electric vehicle. This is the market in China. China is the largest EV market already, and by 2040, 1 out of 4 cars on China's road would be electric, according to IEA. And that started from the central government program and also some city-level policies. So Shenzhen now already have 300,000 EV, and Hainan committed to phase down fossil fuel cars on the market and new cars by 2030. So I'm going to skip this to this one. I want to talk about the waste management a little bit. This picture shows the waste like sites surrounding Beijing city. It's scary. It started with a documentary film in China, very famous one. And last year, also still this year, China started, led by the president actually, started the waste management and trash separation campaign in China. That's what we're doing right now. So there are, again, 26 cities selected as zero waste pilot. However, again, policy implementation is not easy. This is what we got from Shanghai. This is the Shanghai government document showing people how to separate trash. I don't want to read this document. It's so complicated. So I think in order to help people really make actions, we really need a lot of other help. I'll stop here. I'm very happy to be here. And I always like show this picture of Beijing. This is from my office. This is a very nice day and a good environment we hope we will have all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. Really good presentations. I hope that raised some issues. And I'm going to open the floor now. We gain some time, so we can have initially 3 questions. If you want to raise your hands, please tell us your name, what do you do, and who do you direct the question to. I have here one. Please go ahead.
I speak Spanish. Orlando Murillo de Costa Rica. Quería preguntarle a Ming Ho si la gráfica que muestra solo autos eléctricos no considera autos de hidrógeno también para evitar el cambio climático.
I'm going to do translation as well. He's asking if the graphic that you showed, the electric vehicles, it considers as well, what was?
Cars. Hydrogen.
Hydrogenics.
Hydrogen.
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 It's not. It's not. It does not include hydrogen. It includes EV and hybrid.
No incluye.
Hydrogen just started.
Luis Novo from Mexico. This question is for the 3 of you. Do you guys have any certifications to mitigate the climate change? And if you guys get certification, from whom?
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so there are very few companies, but their number is growing very fast that help us really validate the actual carbon footprint and allow us to also work with the cities to help them get carbon credits for the energy savings, especially that we're doing. For example, around the streetlights, when I talked about reducing energy at special times when the grid is dirty. When we're doing that, we're dimming the lights, for example, we're able to get the city back revenue in form of carbon credits, for example. But in order to get to that point, we had to work with companies around very specific definitions of the project and definition of the exact amount of energy and carbon emissions that are generated. It's a long and tedious process today, and this is a very good point where more organizations and easier process to get to those carbon credits would be a much, will help cities adopt this at a much accelerated pace.
We don't, I mean, it's not exactly a certificate, but we agreed to the Global Compact of Mayors. So, and it means that annually we report on our climate action, both on adaptation and mitigation, and also on the reduction of the emissions. So, yeah.
And I would say we tend to work with city councils, so we would rely on the process that they have. But what I would say is that we measure an awful lot. Yeah, we have an awful lot of data, and it might be related to tons of carbon, kilometers driven by vehicles, or tons of weight or recycling collected. So all of these measures, and we have hundreds of them, tend to be gathered independently and objectively and signed off. That's how we understand the impact of what we do.
So for us as a public policy consultancy, we participate some of the protocol development in China of how to define, the credits, the certification protocol. I should say.
Thank you. Any other question from the floor? I can see one at the back. Please come forward. You have the mic in front.
Hi, my name is Antonio. I come from Mexico, but I work for a company called Futureproofed in Belgium. And my question is how to, when there is a strategy on a report, how to really come down to every municipality service and make them work together, how to really ensure that there is a collaboration and that the resilience is really being done transversally. So how does that work in the field, in the everyday life, with the municipality officers having a lot of things to do, and if you want to share something for.
Do you want to take that one?
Right. One of the biggest challenges there is the data and the data models, and how we're in a Babylonian tower right now, where every city has its own language and data models, and but we as citizens move from one city to another, and if those cities don't synchronize and work together, obviously we're not as efficient in our fight against climate change. So working on creating these data models and this unified language to allow that exchange between all the cities and to create more harmonious and homogeneous data that even will create even more insights from an analytics perspective is what we're working as an industry right now with many of the leading cities as well.
Yeah, well, I would say organizational-wise, within the city council, working cross-sectorially, of course it is a challenge, but putting climate change on the top of the priorities and elevating it politically, as it now is the case, it's also helping mainstream climate action and also integrated in all these different sectorial policies that are aimed at the same objective.
Yeah. I just reflect on the theme of my talk, which is you can have some targets and they may be aligned or they may be city-based, for example, but it's really important to check whether people are following those rules. I think I've certainly seen in a different presentation this week about how few people within a city understand the smart city initiatives that their cities engage with, and the same is true, of course, of climate change as well. And sometimes they will see from TV and from other media that there is a climate change emergency, but it might not be clear to them what they have to do or how they need to change to address that.
Well, from my point of view, I think the multi-stakeholder engagement of policymaking process is very critical. But when you implement the policy, it's also important to develop tools and do the communication to really make it easy for people to do it. That's very critical, and the whole SMART concept might be very helpful than before.
Thank you. Coordination, communication, a really good point, urbanization as a challenge, which I think it's quite important because, you know, when we are discussing about climate change, if you have that effect in a place where nobody lives, nobody knows, right? But if you have that effect in cities, in places where people live, is where you feel the impact. So I think that that's a very important message to send. And I think that we have to make sure that we don't take the urbanization process as a negative process. The unplanned urbanization could be a negative process. But a well-planned, with a vision, urbanization could be effective and could, in fact, reduce the effects of climate change. At UN Habitat, we have that kind of difficult task because UN Habitat, I don't know how many of you know what UN Habitat does, but it's the United Nations agency specialized on human settlements. And you will see human settlements is everything, right? Especially now, it's growing daily. 180,000 people moving from the rural areas to the urban areas. So you can imagine what's going to happen. So basically, we have to start, if we have to take two messages from here, I will say, one, climate change is happening, take it seriously. Two, urbanization is happening, take it seriously. I want to thank the panelists for your presentations, and I want to thank the audience as well for coming here. And a big applause, please. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for your patience. This is the second part of the session today. So we heard the previous panel around climate change and resilience. But in order to future-proof your system, whether this is towards climate change or the other big challenges of our era, apart from having a holistic approach, you need to have the right governance structures and processes on how you actually operationalize the action. So the last 5 years, through the program of 100 Resilient Cities, we worked with cities across the globe to support them in creating this unique position of the Chief Resilience Officer and a resilience office within the government, a position that will coordinate this approach towards building the urban resilience of the city. And today I have the honor to have with me three resilience officers from three very, very different cities. So I would like to ask, first of all, Alice Rees, Deputy Chief Resilience Officer from the Greater London Authority, to come up the stage. Genesis Gavino, Deputy Chief Resilience Officer from the City of Dallas in the US. And last but not least, Ahmed AbuLaban, City Manager and Chief Resilience Officer from the City of Ramallah in Palestine. So this is a very kind of informal discussion among CROs. So this is not a presentation. And we will try to understand what resilience actually means in the different cities and how resilience has been measured, how it's been evaluated, but also how the resilience approach actually supports climate action. So I want to start from you, Ahmed. And of course, you have two hats here. The one is being the CRO, but also the city manager. And I would like to ask you, as an introduction, what is the unique resilience approach for Ramallah? What resilience means for Ramallah?
Okay. First of all, I would like to express that I'm so delighted to be here in this important event and to have that opportunity to talk about my city, about the Palestinian case in general, and about my city in specific. And I will be more specific in resilience, don't worry. I won't talk to politics so much. But I just wanted you to know that Palestine, it's the last and the only country in the world which is still under occupation in 21st century. And from that, I will take the definition of resilience. The definition of resilience is the capacity of the city or of the country to survive, to adapt, and to grow. And I will use the Palestinian example as for that. So we do believe that we Palestinians are resilient by nature. We gained that from the tough experience that we have through our conflict with the Israeli side. From one clear example about it, in 2002, we were about 2.5 million Palestinians in West Bank. We were under Israeli curfew for 23 days. 2.5 million under curfew for 23 days. And in the next day, we start to rebuild what was demolished by the Israeli soldiers. And we're still so optimistic. So from that, we do believe that it's our ability to survive and to adapt and to adjust and at the same time to build. And that's why we have our own vision in Ramallah City as an inclusive city, as a dynamic city, as an optimistic city with that. So,
and you have inspired a lot of cities and a lot of cities in the network by this dynamic. So, Genesis, same for Dallas. Like, what is the unique resilience approach for Dallas?
Yeah, so just by way of background, for people who don't know, Dallas, Texas, we are the 9th largest city in the United States. About 1.3 million people spread over 385 square miles. We have the largest rail system, continuous rail system in the United States, and we are home to about 10 Fortune 500 companies. So we have a lot of wealth in Dallas, but we also have great disparity in Dallas. And how we approach our resilience strategy is looking at the inequities that exist for the people of Dallas. We are leading with equity, specifically racial equity. If you guys don't know, United States has a very long history of racism, segregation. And so for us, acknowledging that we as a government have perpetuated these systems of these institutionalized systems of racism and discrimination, we are making a concerted effort to address that for our people. And so for us, we took a step and tried to measure inequity for our city, looking at what are the different factors that show that there are different rates of success for different groups of people within our city. So that's how we define resilience for the city of Dallas, is focusing on our people as opposed to focusing on infrastructure or making it climate change proof, essentially.
Interesting. And Alice, the Greater London Authority is in the process of finalizing their resilience plan. And again, London has millions of different strategies and plans. So what is the unique value and what is the perspective that you bring?
Thanks, Lina. I think for us it's been an interesting experience. So resilience traditionally in London has existed for a long time, but it very much exists within a framework of emergency planning. So when we think of resilience, we think of emergencies, we think of that point when things go wrong and how we manage it. And I think what the strategy has brought for us and what the change that the strategy is doing for the Greater London Authority and policy in London more generally is to take the resilience out of emergencies so that we don't just associate resilience with emergencies. And bit by bit, we're trying to bring it into all the different mainstream policies. So although we have very advanced, I would say, climate change policies compared to some cities, in fact, we don't think about that as resilience. And we've never thought about that as resilience. It sits in its own ivory tower as climate change mitigation, but we've never associated it with resilience. And so this opportunity that we've taken with the resilience strategy is to bring all these different things together and have the conversation about how activities linked to emergency planning, linked to forward look, linked to future-proofing the city.
We're looking forward for the strategy.
Let's see.
So, Ahmed, Ramallah released a strategy 2 years ago.
Exactly.
So you are 2 years into implementation. One of the challenges that we've seen in other cities is how actually the resilience strategy, how it communicates with other statutory documents that the city has or other different government structures have. So how have you used the resilience strategy and how have you connected with other documents?
Yeah, I think it's to launch a strategy, it's a big achievement. We celebrated in that achievement in that event, but the most important challenge, how we can implement the results and the recommendations and the activities in that strategy. So that's why Ramallah strategy, to the 2050 Ramallah city strategy, it has been the cornerstone in our planning for the medium and the short term. For our SDIP, the Strategic Development Investment Fund, and for our annual action plan, everything is depending on the 2050 strategy. And that strategy also depends on or connected with SDGs, with the 17th of them. So what we believe that there is a very, very important relationship between resilience and inclusion. So, and at the same time, we have our own definition about the buzzwords that they use it, and sometimes, honestly, the donors throw these buzzwords to describe the cities. Sometimes they will see a resilient city, others sustainable city, smart city, green city, caring city, creative city. We have so many, diverse city, inclusive city. So what I believe that if you are a smart city or resilient city or sustainable city, all of them are the same. If we take into consideration the criteria to be a dynamic city and to cover all the areas of that. And while that, we are working very well and we achieved a very good, we did great in our progress to implement that strategy.
And we've seen also other cities, and Milan actually was meant to be here, but this year couldn't make it. That, for example, they have connected the resilience strategy with their master plan, and how you actually a strategic document becomes and you extract the principles of the actual urban planning, the main urban planning document in the city. So Genesis, again. You are in a year within of your implementation of the strategy, and an important issue that again a lot of cities have identified is how do you evaluate what you're doing and what is the system behind it in order to understand, does this work? What is the change that is happening on the ground?
Right. So within our first year, our priority was to collect data and publish a report called Equity Indicators. And so for us, that is looking at 6 different areas. So economic opportunity, education, neighborhood and infrastructure, justice and government, and then public health. Within those 6 topic areas, you have various indicators that we measure. So for us, looking at, we were measuring between 2 groups and not comparing our population versus different cities or different countries. We're looking at, for the people that exist in our cities, how is it that they are accessing services? Do they find that they have access to their government? Or what are the rates of poverty between like white people, black people, Asian? And that for us is how we measure resilience and equity, is that there are no disparities between one group or another group. It's equal across the board. And we might rate lower than another city, but at least for us, within our jurisdiction, for access to services or economic and social mobility is equal across the board for our people. So that's how we're measuring resilience and equity and understanding how do our various programs fit into these indicators? How will it move the needle in terms of poverty, childhood or third grade reading levels, which is a really common measurement in the United States of can you read at a third grade level, which can predict various factors for adulthood and your success in adulthood.
Alice, for London also, it is very important to be able to have a system to measure progress. So how are you going to deal with this, and what piece is integrated in the strategy?
I think this is a really good question. I think it's something that we are still trying to build at the moment. It's very interesting hearing the work that you're doing on this, because I think fundamentally, if we don't measure inequality or inequity at a city level, actually we're missing something in terms of resilience. And this is something we would like to build into our monitoring in the longer term. Having said that, we don't necessarily have all the data yet in place to be able to do it. So our primary focus with initial levels of monitoring and how we're going to start working this in the first year or so is to look at modeling around modeling and quantifying disruptions. So starting from our very traditional resilience space of looking at emergencies, because that's where we know that we can get people involved, we want to look at understanding how much disruptions cost to our city. So we actually are quite a long way at the moment from having a robust set of figures to understand if something goes wrong in one part of the city, what is the damage inflicted on the rest of the city. So how much not only does that cost to London, but also what the impact is on the population and on the businesses and on day-to-day life. Because to put that into context, London may be a city of around 10 million people. We also have several million more people commuting in every day. So the size of our city grows exponentially between 9 and 5, 8 and 6, and then it goes down again. So actually understanding those modelling, the idea of modelling between different times of day, different populations that is all one London, actually if we can understand that, then that can give us a hook into measuring how robust and how resilient we are becoming.
And how important is your collaboration with the Smart City team in the GLA or the data team?
I think this is a great opportunity for us, and it's funny that the easiest projects and the best projects we've had in terms of launching have been with our smart cities, with our data team, because when you think about resilience, data is so important. Like we can't measure. We don't know what we're doing unless we have all that data. And actually, whether the city, as Ahmed was saying, whether the city is smart, is sustainable, these are all means to an end. So you can use your sustainability, you can use your smarts, you can use all this data to actually build. And these are all just different ways of getting to the same point. And I think, talking to our smart cities team, I think this is the page that we're all on. I think convincing others is maybe more challenging.
Ahmed, the resilience strategy has initiatives that the city can do on its own, but also has a lot of initiatives that actually requires partnerships and partnership with others. So from your experience to date, what are like the most impactful partnerships that you've seen? Who are the best allies for a city to implement a strategy like that?
Okay, nice question. So I do believe that partnership is a very important tool to achieve and to translate the strategies, the recommendations, or activities on the ground. So that's why I'm so proud to mention about some of our achievements. One of them, it was a partnership with the British Council. We issued a study to talk about resilience in culture and education. And that study, it was part of for Ramallah City and Athens. And that was through also 100RC and with the British Council. The other one, we are a member in another international network which is called City to City Migration, Mediterranean City to City Migration, and we are working with them to prepare an inclusive strategy for Ramallah City, for the whole city. In addition to that, we have another partnership with the Chinese government. They supported us in a huge project to rebuild or to build a school and to have different roads connected that school with the different areas. And another thing also we have, I forgot. Okay. Another thing about the main challenge that face any city in the world about mobility and public transportation, also we have another partnership with the World Bank for the 4 main cities, which is 3 surrounding Ramallah, to have a technical and feasibility study for public transportation, and that was funded by the World Bank, and it started just 2 weeks ago.
Great. And has the strategy actually helped you articulate these partnerships better?
Yeah. I think because we realized that for each, our strategy has 3 main strategic intervention and 37 strategic goals, and after that the targets. And with each goal and targets we have connected and some activities and projects. As an example, we are working now to have our annual action plan for 2020, so it should be connected with the strategy. So we're supposed to have at all, it's cross-cutting for all our departments. They need to have some activities or actions or projects which is connected with 2050 strategy.
Great. So, and this is a question for both Genesis and Alice. And just to kind of anchor to the previous panel around climate change and climate action. So your entry point, specifically in Dallas, your entry point is equity. Mm-hmm. But how do you think that this approach actually facilitates and supports the climate action that the city does?
Right. So I think starting from an equity standpoint, we, like I said, we as a government have done so much to our people in accepting and acknowledging that we played a role in the current state of our climate, that putting it all on our people I don't think is fair. I think we have to ask the question as, what did we as government do and what role did we play to put us in these situations? What is our responsibility to address the infrastructure and the systemic barriers that our people can't have to overcome in order to have access to hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, right? We push so much that we need to have solar panels, we need to recycle more, we need to compost. But when you're talking about households who have to choose between whether they want to pay rent, or not want, but can they pay rent, or how are they going to get to work? Like, we push transportation so much, public transportation. Yet in southern Dallas, it takes a minimum of an hour and 30 minutes to just go 15 miles to get to an employment center. That is how terrible our public transportation system is. So when we're pushing green initiatives that drive less, walk more, ride the bus more, yet we have sidewalks. I mean, even in my own neighborhood, and I live downtown, a sidewalk just ends. And I'm like, where do I go from here? What, you know, it's like, so we as government or even nonprofits, community-based organizations cannot go to our people and say, hey, be greener, when we can't even facilitate that infrastructure for them to be greener. And so that's how equity comes in. How do we turn the question back on ourselves and say, what is our role to play? How do we facilitate that? And how do we make it successful for everybody across our city?
Great, very important point. Alice?
Quite hard to follow that, I think. So I think it's interesting, your point about how the kind of interaction between equity, equality, and climate change, because a lot of the work that London has done on climate change has a very big equality angle to it. So when we were originally thinking about this, and one of our big projects on climate change around hyper-low air pollution, actually, the data that we were seeing was around where the most pollution were also some of the most vulnerable, impoverished areas of London. So there was one part of this was turning the lens on ourselves and saying, actually, well, yes, we need a cleaner city, we all need to be able to breathe, but actually the multiplier effect of understanding that it was the most deprived communities that were struggling with some of the big climate change issues in London was a real game changer in getting the projects off the ground and getting them funded as well. And that's been a big focus for our current mayor, and I think it's also been, in terms of looking at climate change, it's in London, it isn't a big political issue. It has been something that people have pretty much jumped on immediately because it's been something that makes the city so much better in terms of air pollution, in terms of various greening projects and the like. And actually, what I think is interesting is, for us, London is a city where the mayor does not have that many powers. We don't have that much fundraising ability comparative to maybe a lot of US cities. So we actually have a very limited scope within which we can work. So we find that having the multiplier effects of looking at climate change and inequality and other issues together, actually that really helps us get projects off the ground.
Yeah, that's important. So I want to open the floor to questions. So any questions to our speakers? Yes, please. You can use the microphone.
Luis Novo from Mexico. And this question is for the three of you. Is there any platform or a network where you can share your experiences so you can learn from each other and implement the best practices?
Actually, I can respond to that. And apologies because I think I didn't introduce myself at the beginning as well. So we are part of the 100 Resilient Cities program that was pioneered by the Rockefeller Foundation, and this was a program that supported and created a network of cities across the world, as the ones that are represented here, in order to support them in building their urban resilience. And now in our second phase, the network kind of takes a life of its own. And a big part of the network is the peer learning among the cities and trying to connect the knowledge, but also the questions, and aggregate the needs in order to be able to articulate them better, whether this is to the global kind of fora or to other partners or other organizations that would like to support the cities in their implementation of the strategies. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Other question? No. So, just a final word from each one of you. What is the next frontier in your resilience work? What is like your priority for the next few years?
Start.
No pressure. Well, I think the priority for the next 2 months is probably getting the resilience strategy actually published. Beyond that, for us, our really kind of core objective is to be able to tell this story to all of London and get all of London involved. So because of the way we've worked so far, it's been a very collaborative approach, but actually the reach that we want to have is into our businesses in London so that we can really create a wave effect so that they can understand our governance processes around resilience and around sustainability. And we can communicate that very clearly, that actually if you want to be part of London, this is a really core to your existence in London, is looking at long-term climate change goals, looking at long-term sustainability goals, and really buying into being part of that. So I think it's that narrative for us that's really important.
Yeah. So for Dallas, I think because we're going into our second year of implementation, it's important for us to embed resilience into our organization. And I think Ares talked about this earlier, is all of the divisions across the city need to understand that they play a role in resilience, in climate change, and all the different factors that we consider when we talk about resilience. And it's not just a pet project that Rockefeller Foundation decided to give us funding for, and then the funding dries up, and now we're just an office that exists, but that in everything that we do, we have to be resilient. When we think about if we're going to build, a building, will the building withstand whatever shocks and stressors that come our way? And so how are people going to use? So many different considerations that resilience can play a part in, and it's not just another program or another office within the city.
I think I mentioned about that in our annual action plan for the 2020, but I would like to take advantage of the 1 minute, if I have, to talk about, or less, about the pioneer projects that I'm so proud that we did it, and it's a result also of that strategy. I forgot to mention that we have another project which was part of our partnership with ANERA organization. It's the reuse of wastewater for irrigation. And another thing, we completed the whole city to change all the electricity street lighting from the old system to LED. In addition to that, I'm so proud to announce that we established very important and unique projects which targets the retired seniors. It's the first and not the only one in Palestine, but also in the region, which targets the seniors, the retired persons, and it consists that they have a great experience, and that experience should be transferred to the new generation.
That was less than a minute.
Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's always very inspiring to hear directly from the cities and what the cities are doing. And I think resilience it can be a very broad concept. On the other hand, it's an approach, and it is important that it adapts to the specific issues, challenges, and priorities of the city. So thank you very much. And a round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.